you guys! Thank you so much for clicking on this video and welcome back to my channel. Today I have another thrift flip. Oh my god, every single time I film a thrift flip I always mess it up. Okay, today I have another thrift flip for you. I found these amazing linen pants at the thrift store. They have massive legs. Like, honestly, these pants are like parachutes. There is so much fabric in the leg and they're a really good quality white linen. So I thought it would be the perfect thing to make a nice summer puff-sleeved top out of them. If you have read my blog or looked on my Instagram, you can tell that I'm pretty obsessed with puff sleeves. And I think pretty much everyone is right now. Summer 2020 puff sleeves are very popular and they're very cute. I'm going to be using the legs as like the main fabric piece here. So if you're buying your own at the thrift store or like using something you already have, just look for something with nice, wide, big legs. If you do recreate this, then please tag me on Instagram. I'd love to see what you come up with. I'm gonna try and make this very easy to follow along. There is a little bit of like making your own pattern just for the front and the back, but I'm just cloning one of my t-shirts that I already use and I showed you exactly how to do that, so most of you should be able to follow along. So basically it's gonna be gathered at the top and then also gathered at the bottom. Here, maybe we'll use the wide part. It's gonna be gathered at the bottom and then gathered at the top. This looks weird. You'll see it once we do it. If you enjoy this video, then please be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And I'd love to hear down below if you have any other video suggestions for me to do and work on. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So let's get straight into the tutorial. So my plan for this top, as I said before, is just a simple white puff sleeve top that ties up in the back. And I wanted very large, kind of unstructured, puffy, gathered sleeves. And I think those ties that tie up the back are the cutest detail and just add something extra to the top. And to make it, you will need a front piece, a back piece, which will end up cutting down the middle, 2 sleeve pieces, and several long pieces to make the shirt ties. To start, grab a normal t-shirt that fits you well and isn't too oversized. You could also use a tighter fitting t-shirt here to make this pattern and skip the modifications I'll be making to make the top more form-fitting. So I'm just tracing the front neckline across the shoulder and down the armhole. And I'm just using my fingers to guide my pencil down the seam and then mark down the side of the top as well, and then you can fold the shirt evenly in half and mark that halfway point. And I'm choosing to add a shallower neckline as well, and also I'm moving the armhole in by around 1 inch as well as the side, which I redrew, as you can see, with that kind of slight diagonal towards the center just to hug my waist a little bit better. Then you can flip the shirt around and repeat the exact same steps to make the back pattern. And I cut out the front template just to make sure the center and the modifications I made were even on both sides. Just note that the back armhole, when you're cutting that in, should be shallower than the front, and same with the neckline, but other than that, it's pretty much the same piece. Next, for the armhole, trace the back of the sleeve, again using your fingers to guide the pencil around that seam, and then flip the shirt over and trace around the front side. And for the purposes of this top, it really doesn't matter how precise you are, as you'll see later, so just mark in the general outline. And then I extended the length down by about 3 inches and up by around 5 inches, and then using those markings, I just freehanded a curve around the top and bottom of the sleeve, adding more of a curve around the top to create that puff, and then sloping downwards around the edges. And you can modify this to create whatever kind of sleeve you would like. Basically, the more you add to the bottom, the longer the sleeve will be. The more you add to the top, the larger the puff you'll get, and then the more you extend the sides, the more volume you'll get in the end when you gather it. To start off with my pants, I cut off the legs, just getting as much material as I could, and then I turned both of the legs inside out, making sure that it was laying completely flat with the seams at both sides. Then I cut out my sleeve using the pattern we made before, folded in half along one side seam, and then basically when you open up the fabric, you'll have that whole sleeve piece. And I repeated the exact same thing with the other leg, using the first sleeve as a tracing pattern, and then with the remaining pant leg, I cut up the side seam to get a long rectangle, and folded one side in half to meet that seam. And my pants were large enough for me to fit the entire pattern piece onto one side, but if yours aren't, then you might just have a seam going down the front of your shirt, which can also be a cool look. So I laid down my front pattern piece along the fold, cutting all around it, making sure to include seam allowances. For the back pattern piece, I ended up folding the long edge inwards by around an inch, and this is going to show a little bit more of my back in the final shirt and also make the ties in the back look a little bit more purposeful rather than just for decoration. And the great thing about this is that we're not going to have to re-hem the bottom of the shirt because we're just using the already existing hem that was on the pants. Now I am pinning the front to the back along both side seams and also along the shoulder lines, or the tops of the shoulders, whatever, and then you're going to sew along where we've pinned, making sure that both pattern pieces are right sides together. Then be sure to zigzag stitch over the raw edges if necessary. Unless you have a serger, then you would obviously use that. And also, as you can see, I ironed my seams open around the edges of the top so then I could sew them down just following the stitching from the existing hemline, and that way you won't get any bumpy seams from the outside of your top. Here I am just measuring and cutting straight up the middle of the back of my top, and then I tried it on just to make sure that I liked the way everything fit me. And that's when I realized that, of course, everything was going a little bit too smoothly and I had forgotten one essential step, which was sewing in darts. Because even though I don't have the biggest boobs, they are still there, and unfortunately they still demand some attention. Moving on. To sew in the darts, I put the top on and placed a pin right over where like my nipple would be. Let's all be adults here. And then I drew in a diagonal line going out into the sleeve area from that point. And for some reason, I thought that I had to seam rip up the sides of the top to be able to do this. And then I realized in the end that I didn't, and then I was even more frustrated because seam ripping has already taken up several months off of my life, and it's even more annoying when it's useless. Anyways, I marked 1 inch on either side of that line I had drawn and then folded along the line and then sewing a diagonal line, creating a long triangle shape. And it should look something like this when you're finished. And depending on the size of your chest, you may need to make larger or smaller darts. Just measure it on yourself and see what works for you. I also took this time to cut in the armholes a little bit, and for reference, the shoulders ended up being around 3.5 inches, but again, just try on the top and make any modifications you need to fit your body and just to make the top feel comfortable on you. Moving on to the sleeves, I went in by around 5 or 6 inches and made a little mark with a pin, and then I measured that same distance on the other side. And basically, you're going to sew a straight stitch around the top edge between both of those markings using your longest stitch length and being sure not to backstitch on your machine. And then on one side, you can take the loose threads and tie them into a knot, and on the other, you can grab one of those threads and start pulling it and gathering with your fingers all along the top of the sleeve. Now just measure around the armhole of your top. Mine was 19 inches, and that's how long you need the edge of your sleeve to be. So you can gather it either more or less depending on your measurement. And I also decided to cut off an extra inch from both sides of my sleeve because I had already gathered it quite a bit, and I just decided to cut off that excess. And once it's the right length, you can tie off the threads that you were pulling on just to secure everything in place. And then fold the sleeve in half, right sides together, and sew down the side, making sure again to zigzag stitch all of your seams afterwards. Once you have your sleeve all finished, turn it right sides out and stick it into the armhole of your top so that the right side of the top is facing the right side of the sleeve. And then you can align your seams and pin all the way around the circumference of that shoulder hole, being sure to evenly distribute the gathers out as you go, and then repeat this on the other side. And once you're done, you should have something that looks like this. To finish off the sleeves, grab some elastic. I think mine's around 1 centimeter thick, and then measure out enough to fit around your bicep area or wherever you want your sleeve to gather on your arm, and mine ended up being around 9 inches. Then with the sleeve turned inside out, I'm going around the armhole and folding down around 1/2 centimeter to tuck away that raw edge, and then I'm folding that down by around 1/2 inch, or enough to fit your elastic through. And I pinned that all the way around the sleeve. And then you can sew a straight stitch very close to the edge of that hem, creating a channel that the elastic is going to go through, but just make sure to leave a few inches unsewn so that we can actually fit the elastic in. So once that's all sewn down, grab the elastic you cut and attach a safety pin to one end, and then feed that elastic through the channel, just using your fingers to guide the safety pin around until it comes out the other side, and make sure not to lose the other part of that elastic in the sleeve as you're doing this. Then make sure that the elastic is laying flat all the way around the channel and it isn't twisted around anywhere. Then layer each end of the elastic over each other and sew the two ends securely together to create a loop. I used a zigzag stitch here because I thought that looked the most secure. Then you can tuck that back into the channel and sew it shut, and voila, the arms are finished. Now to finish the back off, I'm just hemming the raw edges by folding over by around 1/4 inch and then folding that over again to create a clean finish. Then I'm sewing all the way down that line. And I repeated the exact same thing with the neck hole by just folding the edge over and then over again to tuck away any of those fraying edges and then sewing everything down. The trick to making your handmade items look professional is really sewing straight seams. So really try your hardest here because these seams will show from the outside. Now for those back ties, take your remaining fabric from the pant legs and cut either 6 shorter strips or 3 long strips that you can then cut in half, and all of those are going to be around 1 to 1.5 inches long. And then I really did not want to pin all of these down, so I decided to iron them instead by first folding them in half, then folding each side into the middle, and then folding that entire thing in half, sandwiching both of those sides together. Then I sewed a straight stitch very close to the edge and over one end by just folding that edge into itself, and then on the other end I used a zigzag stitch over the raw edge to prevent any fraying, and I repeated that for all 6 pieces. Then I pinned them down at equal distances on the back of the top, and I stitched each tie down following the hem we sewed in earlier to make everything look clean and very seamless. I also decided to add another row of stitching very close to the edge, as you can see, just to add another level of professionalism to the top, but that is totally optional. And then you are finished with your top. It's a bit windy, so you probably can't hear me, but this is the final product. I am so happy with how this top turned out. I really love how big and loose the sleeves are, and also the very simple, minimal front contrasting with that more detailed back with the fun ties. And at first, I will admit, I was a little bit worried that I had made the top so short because I kind of ran out of fabric in the pant leg, but now that it's all finished, I love how it looks as a super cute crop top with some high-waisted pants and sneakers, and I just can't wait to wear this a lot more all summer. And because of the linen, it's super breathable and light looking, but it also has that structured, clean look, which I love. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this video. I certainly enjoyed making it, and let me know down below if you'd like to see more thrift flips in the future. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you again soon.